Okay, so welcome back. We're going to talk about the class Reptilia. So there's broad diversity in this class, but there are several shared characters. And by the way, let me just back up a second here. There it is. So members of this class include some organisms you're probably pretty familiar with, such as turtles, crocodiles, the squamates. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. The squamates, which would include snakes, as well as some extinct groups, including pterosaurs and groups of organisms that are part of the dinosaurs, such as the sauropods, and also the birds, which are a type of theropod and are still living today. So they are the only group from that dinosaur lineage that we still have that are extant, meaning not extinct. So as I said, there are some important shared characters. One of these characters is keratinaceous scales that help keep their skin watertight, and this is really, really important because it allows them to have a greater ability to live on land and not get overly desiccated and dried out. So they have this keratinized skin. Now sometimes this will end up being, the scales you might be familiar with, on a lizard, or this keratinized skin might develop into feathers on a bird. So, because they have this watertight skin, they can't really, or rather I should say they have this kind of watertight layer on their skin, they can't really breathe through their skin anymore like the amphibians can. So instead they have large lungs that they use for respiration. They typically lay shelled eggs on land, and fertilization is internal, inside their body, rather than having gametes released into the environment to meet. Fertilization happens internally. Most are ectothermic. An important exception to this would be the birds, which are endothermic. So endothermic, the birds are endo. So this means that they must maintain their body heat metabolically. So avian endothermy actually arose independently from mammalian endothermy, but it's the same basic idea that we are going to use our metabolism to help maintain our body heat, and an ectotherm doesn't do this. Okay, so let's talk about some modern reptile groups. So the lineage that eventually led to the modern reptiles was known as the diapsid lineage, and about 300 million years ago it diverged to two separate lineages. One lineage known as the lepidosaurs, and this lineage includes tuataras, lizards, snakes, as well as a handful of extinct reptiles, and the archosaurs, which include crocodilians, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs, which include birds. Interestingly, we're not 100% sure where turtles fit into this picture. That's sort of still being resolved. But here's a few images of some modern reptiles, all of which I'm sure look pretty familiar to you. Okay, so let's talk about these lepidosaurs. So the tuatara is actually only one species, and it's this, to see the real thing, this guy right here, that lives on small islands around New Zealand, and is greatly threatened by rats that have been introduced to those islands. Rats tend to go wherever humans go, so that's just kind of something that happens, and they eat the eggs of this animal. And then a larger group are the squamates. So this includes lizards and snakes. So there is pretty dramatic size variation within this group, ranging from small lizards that can be as little as 16 millimeters to the 3-meter long Komodo dragon and very large constrictor snakes. Snakes, by the way, are legless, carnivorous, and sometimes venomous. And one thing we see in the lepidosaurs is a 3-chambered heart. So here's a 3-chambered heart. I've just put up the amphibian, so this is the amphibian heart for comparison. So the 3-chambered heart is good at, or better at than the amphibian heart was, at separating oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, and also better at generating a higher blood pressure, which can help drive a higher metabolism. So this this heart is a really important innovation in helping these organisms have a higher metabolism and potentially getting larger. Okay, so the next group we're going to talk about are the turtles, and their place in the reptile phylogeny is still a little bit unresolved. Stay tuned, though. I'm sure that more info is coming as research moves forward. So turtles are really the most distinct looking, I think, in many ways. They have that classic box-like shell that we're so used to seeing. We're so used to seeing that we don't think about how really unique it is. So it's got an upper and lower shield, and the old cartoons they'd have where the turtle would jump out of its shell. That can't really happen because the shells are actually fused to parts of its body, like the vertebrae, the clavicles, and the ribs. So that's not going to work. You can't pull a turtle out of its shell, so don't try. So some are aquatic, some are terrestrial. Some turtles, like the leatherbacks, can get, sorry, I should point. So the leatherback's an aquatic turtle. This organism lives its entire life in water, comes on shore to lay eggs, and that's pretty much it. This organism can reach 1,500 pounds. I'm sorry, 1,500 kilograms, which would be about 3,300 pounds. These guys pretty much eat just jellyfish. Some turtles are strictly herbivorous, some are carnivorous, but most are actually omnivores, eating both a variety of aquatic, terrestrial plants and animals. So the crocodilians include alligators and crocodiles. This is a very old lineage beginning in the late Triassic. The very earliest of crocodilians were probably very small. They were terrestrial and walked on long, thin legs. More recent members are more adapted to aquatic habitats, spending most of their time in the water, usually just coming on land to lay eggs. And their legs are usually shorter and kind of more sprawled out. They are definitely more adapted to being fast in the water than the land. In some time periods, such as the Mesozoic, some crocodilians were absolutely enormous, up to 12 meters long. And one of the things about crocodiles, or crocodilians, is that they provide parental care to their offspring. This includes guarding the eggs in their nest and even guarding the offspring after they hatch and communicating with them after they hatch. A really important thing we see happening in the crocodilians is we now have a 4-chambered heart. So, sorry about that. A left and right aorta. I'm sorry, a left and right ventricle, and left and right atrium. There, that's the word I was searching for. So what is this good for? Well, what this is good for is we see in the heart now, we don't have any mixing at all of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. We have a complete division here. So what this means is not having kind of the dirty blood, if you will, mixed with the clean blood, is that we can be much more efficient and we can be sending our deoxygenated blood to the areas we need to sort of clean it, get the CO2 out, get more oxygen in, so we can send it to the lungs to do that the blood that is oxygenated, we can send to the different parts of the body that need it. So it's a much more efficient system, allowing us to have even higher metabolism. Okay, so let's talk birds. So the birds are archosaurs like the crocodiles are. Almost every aspect of their anatomy and physiology is adapted to flight. So they have lots of weight-reducing adaptations, including no bladder. In females, only one ovary, and in both sexes, the gonads are very small. They lack teeth. Their bone wall is reduced in thickness, and so they have sort of buttresses for support instead. So here's an image of the interior of a bone from a bird. So you could appreciate by looking at that, hopefully, that this would greatly reduce the weight of that bone. We also sometimes just have some bones that have been completely lost, or multiple bones fused together, all in the service of trying to make this organism lighter, so that flight will be easier. And of course, the most obvious adaptations for flight are feathers, which essentially are modified scales. So birds have that keratinized skin, and instead of making scales like we might see on other types of reptiles, we make feathers. And of course, wings. We also see in birds extremely large pectoral muscles that our wings will connect to the wings connect to them, and then these large pectoral muscles that we'd have there are what are going to drive flight. So avian flight is a huge expenditure of energy that is supported by a high metabolism. These organisms are endothermic, so that's really unique among reptiles, being endothermic. Meaning they use their metabolism to create their body heat. They also have adaptations to help retain body heat once they make it. So things like feathers and also layers of fat provide insulation to retain this body heat. Birds also have a 4-chambered heart, like the crocodilians do. This again gives us more efficient circulation and helps drive a higher metabolism. Birds also have very acute vision. Many birds have much better vision than humans do. Good hearing, good fine motor control, and brain function. All really adaptations for that incredible task of flying. So this is where we're going to end this video, and we're going to pick up talking about the mammals, and we'll work our way from all the way to humans. So coming up, mammals. See you soon.